Good evening.
Good evening, Tomasz.
It's good to see all of you as we come together on this wonderful afternoon to celebrate the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. And I believe the last time this particular feast fell on Sunday was in 2008. He just reminded me it was 2008. Now, it has been said in many different ways by many different people that if you can't imagine it, whatever it may be, if you can't imagine it, it may never happen. Imagination. Imagination is immensely powerful, immensely important when it comes to our lives, to our faith, as well as our personal growth and discovery. Throughout the Catholic tradition, faith and imagination go together. Now, an imagination is this ability to see with your mind and with your heart what is not yet, what we can't see with our eyes yet. You see, children turn to it often and effortlessly. But it is not just for children. It can make a difference, a real difference for anyone. Just think about advances in science and technology. They all come initially from imagination. Henry Ford imagined one day moving from traveling by horses to traveling by car. And eventually it happened. Thanks be to God. Aren't you grateful? Traveling by air came from the imagination of the Wright brothers. The telephone that connects all of us came from the imagination of Alexander Graham Bell. And the list could go on and on and on. The light bulb, television sets, internet, bifocals, thanks be to God. Imagination, when you think about it, accounts for similar advances in basically everything in life. In science, in medicine, in art and music, in space exploration, basically everything. The list goes on and on. Now again, imagination is all about imagining in our minds and our hearts something that does not exist, but could exist. Does not exist, but could exist. Or even more importantly, should exist. Imagination is all about changing the present situation or conditions, and imagining a different or a better future that does not exist yet, or fully exists yet, or is hidden from us. Now, having said all of this, if that is true, it only makes sense that we can and we should use our imagination to connect to God and dream about the future that God wants to bring about in our personal lives, in the church, and the world. You see, our imagination is an important and powerful tool that can help us go deeper in our faith and expand our horizon, our vision, our perspective. I'm saying all of this because that's precisely what happened to Paul, to Peter, to the early apostles in the church 2,000 years ago. Paul imagined something that did not exist. And he had to convince Peter that what he imagined was in fact God's will for the church. This is what God wanted, this is what God desired. And he tells us about it personally in our second reading today, in his letter to Galatians that he himself wrote 2,000 years ago. And in that letter, he first tells Galatians that the good news he had received and preached came to him from God through Jesus, not from any human being. Then he talks about the fact that he used to persecute the church. And finally, he speaks about the fact that God called him and set him apart for a special mission. And this is what he writes in today's second reading. But when God, who from my mother's womb had set me apart and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, so that I might proclaim him to the Gentiles. And then he continues, I did not immediately consult with anyone about this, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. Rather, I went into Arabia and then returned to Damascus. It's fascinating. Paul is on his own with this mission. He's not talking to anyone about it. And then he continues. Then after 3 years, can you imagine 3 years? Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to confer with Cephas, aka Peter, the first pope. And I remained with him for 15 days. So what we see here is that Paul, as he was called by God, had to imagine the church that God wanted and not he wanted. And the church that God wanted, he realized and understood on the road to Damascus, was the church that was not made up only of Jewish followers of Jesus, but also Gentiles, those who were not Jews, who were coming and wanted to become Christians. And the question that became the question in those days was this: do they, the Gentiles, have to become Jewish first? That is to say, do they have to be circumcised in order to become Christians? Now, to us today, it may seem like a strange question to which we can't even relate. But it was a serious question then. After all, Jesus, the Messiah, was a faithful Jew. It was a question actually that threatened to divide the early church. Ultimately, Paul and Peter agreed that the church should include those who were outside of the Jewish community. And they dared to imagine a church that was bigger than the Jewish religion, one ethnic group, or one nation. The church would include everyone, indeed, the whole world, every race and all the nations. That is the church God wanted. And Paul responded. That took some serious imagination for Paul and Peter to make that switch, to make that transition. After all, Peter was Jewish, so was Paul, and the 12, and the early church. Ultimately, Paul made God's vision for the church that included everyone. He made that vision his mission. And he was arguably the single most important person responsible 2,000 years ago for spreading Christianity throughout the world. Paul and Peter was initially skeptical. Paul and Peter, they dared to imagine a different church. The church that God wanted, not they wanted. And because they dared to imagine, it happened. And it grew. And it spread. And because it did, we can be here today. Just think about it. So in conclusion, just imagine two simple words. But these two simple words can change everything, make all the difference, open the possibilities beyond what we can see here and now. If you just imagine. These two words may be the most important words that God wants to speak to us along the journey of our faith. You see, imagination, I would argue, is essential, if not necessary, in our spiritual life. I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If you can't imagine it, no matter what the it is, it may never happen. But if you can imagine it, God may take you to places that you never knew existed.
Don't forget to follow St. Patrick's on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube. And please join us for any of our live stream masses this weekend. Details are below in the description. God bless you.
Like burning incense, O Lord, let my prayer rise up to you. Like burning incense, O Lord, let my prayer rise up to